Okay. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to another regularly scheduled meeting of the Business Economic Development Committee. I am your chair, Councillor Leonard. Other committee members are Councillors Falloon, Mallard, and Carson. Because we are one member short, I do like to have 5 members on this committee. So if possible, Councillor Dean, would you mind stepping in for Councillor Fish? Thank you, I appreciate that. Finishing introductions, we also have Community Economic Developer Anne Krieg. We also have Council Chair Susan Hawes, and as I just stated, Councillor Dean will be filling in for Councillor Fish tonight. First thing on the agenda, we have our Airport Director Jose Saavedra is going to give us a little bit more details on the runway project, maybe go into some of the passenger details. I'll let you take the reins now.
Good evening, Jose Saavedra, Airport Director. Today I put together a Airport Director report, and I'll provide a little bit more context of how to this report kind of came about. About a year ago, the committee and the council asked for the airport to put together a quarterly update on major things happening at the airport. And at that time, the intent was to get a better sense of the committee of things that were happening at the airports, a lot of activity surrounding different business segments of our operation. And so what I've done over the last several quarters has been put together a report that gathers some of that information. Today, what I did is I brought together the end of the year report. So for quite some time, the airport didn't capture a lot of the accomplishments and efforts that were happening over time. Starting last year, I directed my staff to work together on helping us capture that information. And the result of that effort was the 2024 end of the year report, and that proved to be a good tool to gather a lot of information and highlights and relevant information that we've been working over the last 12 months. And so that report, I won't go into detail into each section of the report, but truly what that does is, again, it captures a lot of the things that we worked over the last 12 months. One thing that you will notice in that report, as I noted the message from the director page, is that 2025 was still a year that we were dealing with the second year of construction of the runway. And so while as a whole, the year was very, very successful, it was marked by a significant amount of disruptions because in essence, we were more or less closed approximately a month. And so even with that level of disruptions, when you look at page 9, and page 9 has the passenger numbers, which is a graph that usually the council and the committee likes to see. When you see the image on the top of page 9, even with that level of disruption, we still had a very, very strong year. And so my sense is that as we lean into 2026, with the vast majority of the construction work on the runway being completed, with the Breeze Airways being now fully integrated into the Bangor market, and as they continue to increase their capacity, and obviously we've seen quite a number of additional seasonal services being added, including Atlanta, Detroit. Most recently, United Airlines announced seasonal service this summer to Denver. So as those conversations continue to improve the services that we have, I would expect that the 2026 numbers will likely be a lot stronger, and that we truly will be able to use 2026 as the baseline year of what we can expect obviously calibrate and use that in our forecast as necessary. But really, that 2026 is going to be the year that we should be taking into account. Because again, 2023 was first year of construction in the runway. 24, second year of construction. And really, 21, 22 were post-pandemic that had some wild sort of forces playing in the market. So the only other thing that I would like to note in the report, and I could go into detail in case that anyone has questions, was the financial portion. So we did a little bit of extrapolating just because obviously as a department of the city, we follow the fiscal year. And so in order to put together a end of the year report, we just used the adjusted so that it would, the numbers that you see reflect in the bottom page on 9 are for calendar year 2025. For new counselors, one of the things that we will see again at the airport as a reminder is an enterprise fund, meaning that we generate our own revenue and that covers the expenses that the airport generates. And if you see at the bottom of that section on page 9, you would see a number of 34 million, 34.6. That's a lot of the federal assistance that we get for a variety of projects that primarily get funded through federal grants that account for anywhere between 90 to 95% of capital projects, large capital projects that are eligible for federal assistance. So I'll pause there for a minute in case anyone has questions.
Questions for Director Zaveda? I did have a quick one regarding the 2026 baseline. Because as you stated, that the last few years of Bangor International Airport has just had a plethora of different variables that have affected the amount of passenger tracking and what our abilities as an airport are actually able to do. By approaching a year where we're not going to have any foreseeable interruptions, what does it look like we have as an asset for our city airport to go forward into the future? Like, well, what does 2023 look like with these consistent numbers in terms of what are our capabilities as an airport, for not just for maintaining it, but also for growth and expansion?
So the best way to approach that question is looking at page 4. So on page 4, what I have outlined there is the primary business segments that the airport services. So number 1, and they're not in no particular order, but the military is a huge component in what we do. So about a third to fourth of the total revenue that the airport generates comes from fuel sources to the military. And so our military segment is a tremendous part of our business. And as part of fostering that relationship, I have a team of airport key players that we work with the military and actually go out and visit their facilities to try to encourage them to continue to use Bangor as their point of service for fueling for any missions that they are looking to do. So the military, again, strong side of the business. On the second side, which we've seen quite a bit of an increases in the domestic airline passenger. In the past, the military it still plays a significant role, but an even bigger role. And so part of the effort has been to diversify some of those segments and increase the bandwidth and capacity that the airlines have. And that looks in different sorts of ways. It could be an upgauge, and that basically means that the airlines are bringing in a larger aircraft, so more seats available. It could be adding frequency, so it might be the same destinations that we have, but adding an extra flight. It can be for destinations that are only serviced maybe 2-3 times a week, maybe moving that to 4 or 5 or potentially daily. Adding seasonal service that eventually the hope is that becomes year-round. So there's a lot of different ways that might not be as flashy, but still are a significant step in the right direction, and we're focusing on different parts of that side. On the other side, the bottom you have the general aviation side, and so that's a lot of our private aircraft. So given our location, we service a tremendous amount of private aircraft through our general aviation FBO. And basically, that the whole operation of the FBO directly can account for approximately 40 to 60% of the total revenue of the airport. So it's a significant portion of our operation that that we're well known for. Anytime we go to trade shows, that's a hallmark of our ability to service private aircraft. And if it's a small aircraft, we could get them in and out in less than 20 minutes. If it's a large aircraft, cargo aircraft, in 40 minutes. So again, one of the key things that we speak with some of our potential customers or current customers. The other section in this page has to do with cargo, and I think that that's one of those areas that we just haven't had the expansion that we would like to. Obviously, having to focus on some of the major infrastructure projects has been the primary focus, but obviously as we move forward, my part of my hope is that we will focus more on developing those relationships, because it doesn't happen overnight. And so actually, as a matter of fact, I just got back from a conference that focuses on cargo operations. And so it being in the right places where they're just making decisions and discussing this type of topics is the first few building blocks that we need to have in those conversations. One other business segment that it's not depicted here, but it is it has to do with a lot of the properties that are owned and operated by the airport. So the airport as a whole, the core business obviously is the aeronautical services that we provide in that part of our business. But aside from that, the airport owns and operates a lot of other properties in which we more or less play the role of landlord. And so whether that's from the place that Nile operates or the innovation center that we work very closely with Anne on overseeing that facility, there's a lot of other surrounding spaces around the airport that are also part of the portfolio that the airport oversees.
And if I can just touch on something more, you or early on, you touched on basically this report is comprised of data that was accumulated by your staff members for what they were able to find. Because of things that, like cargo, for example, something that we could see an expansion on, a growth in, are there other capacities that the airport could potentially grow and expand on, but you just didn't have the staff to or the direction to actually get that data to present to council or to yourself even? Yeah,
so I think that's a very interesting question, because what I would say is that the segments that you see there on page 4, and if we add that other the fifth component of non-aeronautical revenue properties, I think that there's a lot of potential in each of these segments to get additional just the depth that we've been able to deliver on each of these segments. I think that there's a lot more to grow within these segments before we look at other options. Of course, we're always open to that, but I think that it's also very important to be mindful that additional expansion into other segments, whether it's drones, whether it's manufacturing of a large manufacturing facility of aircraft or anything like that, that requires a significant amount of capital. And so as I was sitting in the back listening to Amanda, I think that the parallels between the operation that she runs and the operation that we run at the airport, that's something to keep in mind, because for quite some time, what we've been focusing on is trying to replace some of the legacy infrastructure that has been in place and that either hasn't seen as much use as it is truly capable of doing. And so with that constraint in mind, knowing retrofitting a facility is I think one of the key things, knowing that the financial portion of it, how do we sustain growth, it's important. And as you might recall that for quite some time we've been talking about the connector project. The connector project of close to $15 million expansion project at the airport aimed at linking both terminals. The reason why that's such a tremendous project is because even though at the end of the day it's going to be an extra hold room and a bridge, that bridge is going to allow us to take advantage of the international facility. Right now, we don't have international scheduled flights, but we do have an international facility. With that ability to flex into that other space, we would be able to accommodate a significant amount of increase in the domestic side. That's what we're seeing, and continue to build that line of.
So if I can interject, it sounds like regardless of whatever pathway we want to go for developing, growing the airport, it's going to require networking with other industries that are not necessarily going to be in the state of Maine, particularly. So I guess it's just a general question, but based on your role and what liberties you have for as a director, are there any sorts of conversations because of how big the airport as an enterprise fund is that you're restricted from having, even if it means networking with an entity that the city would almost certainly want to have a collaboration with, but you're not allowed to make that decision because of the circumstances of like what we've ordained your role to make those decisions for it. Does that make sense?
Yes. So okay. I think what you're probably there's a couple things that I want to point out on more or less how to answer that question, because I think at the end of the day, the airport is the airport, as it is a division and department of the city, right? So then really the guidance and direction of what do we want the airport to be comes directly from you, and the amount of resources, whether that's by staffing or by time that you allocate in your conversations on where does the airport need to go, that's dictated by your directive, right? And then my role, obviously, is execute on that general direction that you provide. One thing that I would note just as an industry professional is that it's important to just take a step back and look at what is it that the airport is, right? And I think that fundamentally the airport is a economic engine. So if you're able to, if you start with that premise that the airport is an economic engine, we directly employ 130 employees, but we actively have about 2,000 badges at the airport, meaning that there's about 2,000 people that are directly employed at the airport. The economic impact that has on the community is significant, right? And so it really depends on what the direction of the council is on how much resources do you want to be allocated to this particular economic engine. And so this will grow, and the amount of development that could happen at the airport is directly related to the level of efforts put by the council in the directive to me, or the level of flexibility. If the objective of the council in the committee is to grow the airport, then empowering or setting up a structure that fosters that kind of development is important. And I think that's how I would frame it.
Okay, I really appreciate that clarification at the end. I will want to have another conversation on this, particularly in the future, probably very soon. But I'm going to leave it at that right now. Yes, Councilor Carson.
Yeah, no, I'm just happy that you ended it that way. I would love to see a conversation in the future around something like an airport commission, thinking about, as a potential the economic engine. I'd love to see discussion around a procurement policy. But Jose, for you, This report I think is excellent. And I'm really excited about the potentials that we have for the airport. I would love to have you come back at some point, works if it's okay with our chair here, and actually hear about your challenges. And specifically the challenges that you have at the airport that are related to policy that we set here at the municipal level. I think it would be great to sort of take a look at all of that and see what we can do to.
I would concur with that, Councilor Carson, if I may interrupt. Jose, is that something that you could have at a reasonable time for us? Making sure you have all your other duties ready to go as well.
So I think I would probably need a little more clarification. I got the note on the particular challenges related to policy that comes from the committee. And then what was there anything else that I missed on that?
There's a conversation I am going to bring up regarding the commission, just because you brought up Councilor Carson. I sent a few sneaky emails around 5 o'clock today, and this will be a conversation that I want to start to have with supporting staff behind the scenes, so that we can actually present this conversation of what is a commission, what is it compared to an airport authority, what it is to a municipal airport, going over what the differences of the three types of airport run facilities are, their pros, their cons, because even creating a commission, which even by our council standards, it's not the heaviest thing to do in the world, but forming something like an authority is very much a heavy related thing. In fact, I think it was in 2007, the state of Maine made a statute based on airport authorities in general. Fun note, there are no airport authorities in Maine, but anyway, so there will be more discussion about this particular topic to be had very soon in the future. And I'm sure I'll forward you an email, but both you and Director Krieg on ways to proceed forward regarding this. And if you need to include any other staffers in regards to any information I bring to you or any other counselor brings to you regarding an airport commission, I'm happy to follow up and coordinate, answer any questions so that we can get a really good, thorough discussion and analysis on what this council sees as a direction for its largest enterprise fund. And I'll just leave it at that for right now, but rest assured, Councilor Carson, there is more conversation regarding a commission coming up. Are there any other thoughts or comments for Jose, or Jose, do you have any other final thoughts or comments for us?
So yes, so the way again, just so I could clarify my notes, there's two different conversations. One about or one asked directly to challenges with the current structure as it is in direct policy, and then a second one about options of oversight and structure, correct?
I'll email you the latter one, okay?
Okay.
But the first one, Councilor Carson said, if you Director Creed, do you have any other thoughts? No? Any other thoughts or questions from council?
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much. So the next topic we have are proposed changes to,
Planning officer Anya Collette, yeah.
Anya, I'll just let you take it away.
Okay, sure thing. So yeah, planning officer Anya Collette. So I will I'm pretty sure I summarized before, the 3 state laws that require changes to our code. So we did draft changes to start to comply with those. And in this first round of edits, we are focusing on the urban zones like URD 1 and 2, the land development permit requirements that refer to subdivision, then the parking requirements for things like affordable housing development, accessory dwelling unit rules, and the affordable housing density bonus rules. We did want to split this into two because the changes are a little more clear cut in these areas than they are in like the developing rural areas. There's a lot of uses in those zones like low density residential that are now going to become irrelevant essentially because of these changes. And also we do expect our the first draft of our new land development code next month. So we want to get an idea of how it affects everybody addressing these changes with their draft code, and maybe we can just incorporate what they're doing and apply to our current zoning. So we want to hold off on that round 2 until we get a better idea of what they're proposing. But in the meantime, and we do have, again, we have until July 1 this year to comply, but this will just be a start. So for accessory dwelling unit rules, main changes with that are ADUs. You now have to allow ADUs on lots that have 1 to 3 dwelling units. Currently, it's just single family homes. And then also the minimum square footage has been reduced from 190 to 160 square feet. That's a building code rule, and we can't be more stringent than that. For affordable housing development, we have to allow for basically any development that meets the definition of an affordable housing development. They don't necessarily have to be using the density bonus. They just have to meet this definition. They can have 14 extra feet on top of our maximum requirement. And then also their minimum parking requirement would be reduced to 2 spaces for every 3 units. Currently it's 1 space per unit. And that, as a reminder, that density bonus is allowed in all of our multifamily zones like URD2, MNSD, and then some of our commercial zones where we have multifamily like CPS and GCNS. And so because of these new rules, what I did was we have some definitions currently in that density bonus article. I moved all of those to our general definition section just to make it more clear because again, you might have a development that's not necessarily using that density bonus, but they can use that height allowance or parking allowance. Then moving on to changes to our zones. So with URD1, I basically took.
Excuse me, Clay Nelson.
Oh, I'm sorry. I meant to pause. I didn't. Sorry.
Before you go on, I just had a question on the 14 feet. Is that 2 stories?
Well, an extra 14 feet. I think 1 story is roughly 10 to 12 feet, so it'd probably be an extra story on top of what's already allowed. So,
And currently we're allowing how many stories?
well, in URD 1 and 2, it's roughly 3 stories. And then MNSD, it's 45 feet, so rather 4 stories. And then in SPS and GCNS, it's 60 feet, about 5 stories. So it would be allowing 1 additional story.
Okay, great, thank you.
Sometimes they choose the 14 feet because of different communities measure height differently. Some measure sort of halfway, up the attic. And so that's why if they're adding a story, they'll often do 14 feet.
Yeah, I have a question. It's probably a crazy question, but the parking issue, this is a state requirement, okay? But now if there were federal funding involved for this violates the federal funding, isn't it 1.5 spaces per unit? So I'm just thinking, how many of these building projects are not going to have federal funding?
Again, we haven't been able to find any federal funding requirement on the minimum parking spaces per unit. I feel like the state would work through that, given how many main state housing projects have to have federal funding.
Yeah, I know, that's what I was thinking.
Yeah, Maine Housing Authority is changing all of their rules because of this. Yeah.
Good question.
Questions, thoughts? I mean, I don't really have a choice
Yeah.
at this point, but I mean, I have nothing really else to add unless any other counselor does, but this does need to go to council, right?
Yeah, I have quite a bit more though.
Oh, please,
Yeah,
please,
I just
I'm
wanted to
sorry.
pause. No, it's okay. I just wanted to pause and see. So in URD one, I took just the state language period, and they basically create these 4 different scenarios. So if you're in the growth boundary and you're on public water and sewer, the minimum lot size, you can't require more than 5,000 square feet, and you have to allow 4 units on that lot. That includes ADUs. So for URD one, we're proposing to take that, we're capping it at 4 essentially. And then if you are outside the growth boundary, but you're on public water or sewer, minimum lot size is 5,000 square feet for the first 2 units, and then an additional 5,000 square feet for each additional up to that, again, that cap of 4. If you're inside the growth boundary, but you don't have public sewer, the minimum lot size is dictated by the state septic requirements, so a minimum 20,000 square feet for the first unit. And then each additional unit would be determined by those state sewage disposal rules. And then if you're outside the growth boundary and not served by public water or sewer, we can set whatever minimum lot size we want, which currently in our RNA essentially is what that is. It's 1.5 acres. We do have to allow 3 units on those lots in those situations. And that you can have an ADU on top of that. Just a key consideration with all this is that even with these reduced allowances, you still have to meet the minimum parking requirements and other dimensional requirements like impervious surface ratio, height, lot coverage setbacks. So there's quite a bit there that's still limiting the size of the structure and the footprint on the lot. Then URD 2. So again, we changed that minimum lot size down to 5,000 square feet for the first 4 units. And just to differentiate it from URD 1, since it is supposed to be kind of a step above URD 1, we propose allowing up to 6 units on a lot and requiring 2,500 square feet for each additional unit, so up to the 6. And then the other key difference would be that you could use that affordable housing density bonus in URD 2. You can't use that in URD 1. And then with MNSD and NSD, there's no major changes there, but we did just clarify again that minimum lot size with the 4 units, and then clarify the types of dwellings allowed, because currently we just say detached. And then in USD, we are proposing to change, we have currently a mixed commercial residential use, it's conditional. So we're proposing to move that to permitted by right, because this draft rulemaking by the state says that you can't be more restrictive with residential and commercial areas than you are with regular residential. So there's that. I did just want to touch on another proposed change that's not in here. We did discuss it with the planning board last night, but something that came up was the idea of doing a smaller minimum lot size for single tiny homes. So we do have a lot of lots, especially in our urban areas, that are smaller than our current minimum lot size of 5,000 square feet. And so while you couldn't, a typical home would take up a lot of that lot, a tiny home would really not take up much space, and it would give a lot more avenues for redevelopment. And so planning board was amenable to that idea, so I could just want to put that out there for your thoughts as well.
I appreciate that. I was completely forgot about that point until you just raised it. Any other thoughts for Planning Officer Collette? Any questions?
And then the next change is that the state made it so that basically the current rules for subdivision, when you have to go to planning board for subdivision, is when you create 3 or more units on a lot. The state has changed that now to where it's 5 or more units. And the draft rulemaking says that we can't, for projects that create 4 or fewer units, we can't have a more stringent review process than we use for single family homes. So for us, that's a building permit. However, we can have review for things like parking and buffers and things like that. So what we're proposing is we would have, for any project that creates between 5 and 19 spaces, we would have a minor site plan revision, which is basically just staff review. Currently, our code requires if you're creating 20 or more spaces, it's planning board review. This would have the extra benefit of adding a permitting process for smaller parking lots that we don't have currently. If you're creating less than 20 spaces, it doesn't have any kind of review. And so that would let us make sure that they meet buffer requirements. Are there any questions so far? I have two more things, but I just want to pause and make sure. Okay. Actually, I did cover subdivision. So the only other thing was the offsite parking agreement rules. We do have to allow people to have that offsite parking within a quarter mile of their development, as long as they have a legally binding agreement with the property owners. Any questions?
If no questions or comments, I will take a motion. So moved. Do I have a second? Second, right there. Unless doubted, this will move on.
Okay. I wanted to mention real quick too, that we were looking at drafting some companion changes to this. When it comes to like boarding homes, for example, because these are pretty drastic changes, and allowing more units per lot. Boarding homes in some ways might be a less drastic change. So we might look at reducing some of those restrictions in some zones, like for example, URD2, we limit those to major arterials. So we might look at removing that restriction, and that would allow more flexible use of some of those larger homes. And then in the multifamily service district, it's a conditional use. Maybe we move that to permitted. So just wanted to float that as maybe a companion change that we make to this.
Okay. Is that something that you would recommend that we amend the current motion that was?
No, I
Okay.
just wanted to.
Okay.
We're still
mention
working
that.
on it internally.
Yeah.
Sure, that's totally fine. And of course, feel free to bring anything back to committee if okay. Unless anything else on that topic, leave we're on to the historic preservation changes.
Yep.
Oh, go ahead, please.
So these changes were based on a workshop we had with the Historic Preservation Commission back in October. And we floated some changes by them, which they were good with. So this formalizes those. And this is just the first round. Again, we're doing something similar. We'll plan to come back later with changes that address things like new construction guidelines. Speaking about cultural significance and things like that, those are kind of larger changes, so they're going to take us some time to do. But these are just some simple things we can start off with. So the first thing that we proposed changing was for certificates of appropriateness. Currently, it requires 4 affirmative votes. We would be changing that to a simple majority. Oftentimes, HBC does have issues with quorum, or even not necessarily quorum, but getting to that 4 members present. And so this would kind of help make projects get through the pipeline. And then also allowing solar projects, generators, and heat pumps, changing awning fabric and changes that are not visible from a street, allowing those as minor revisions instead of certificates of appropriateness. And I will say, when we workshopped with the HBC, they were good with that, but for communication devices, they wanted us to keep commercial communication devices as a certificate of appropriateness, and residential devices that could be minor review. So we were going to make that change. The length of approval time for certificates of appropriateness and minor site plan or minor site review, we were proposing to match what we have for planning board permits currently. So extending that out to 2 years to complete their projects. And that helps a lot with some of the problems people run into with availability of historic materials and contractor availability and things like that. And then updating the requirements on replacement of materials. So we use basically what the Secretary of Interior standards recommend for this clause, and we also looked at what other places recommend and used their language. And so we removed that requirement where you have to match a material and composition. We also, for more flexibility, we add a stipulation that if it's technically or economically feasible, to use that same material. So if it's not feasible, then they can maybe use a different material. And I will caveat that with the commission wanted us to include a better definition of economically and technically feasible. which can be difficult because we want to keep some flexibility there. Because these vary so much and they're supposed to review applications on a case-by-case basis. We don't want to be too detailed, but we'll try to find a definition for that and bring that back. We also wanted to clarify that replacing to match is exempt. And it's already a thing, but we just want to make sure people know that. And then also for hardship provisions, providing clarification that one of the hardship provisions could include things like difficulty finding a contractor or extended timelines for completing a project if the structural integrity of the structure is in danger. And the commission wanted us to insert a clause in there that someone has to provide evidence on why, that is a hardship. So we'll add that in there. And then we added a minor clarification on the application requirement for certificates of experience. So those are all the changes. Any questions?
I have a question.
Yeah.
Did you say this had been reviewed by Historic Preservation?
Yes.
That's interesting. I talked with the director today and they said they had not completed the review of it.
Are you talking about the state?
Yes.
Yes, that's right. This all hinges on them also reviewing it.
Right,
So
that's what I thought.
Yeah, so I meant the commission, our commission.
Okay.
Yes,
So the state hasn't reviewed it yet.
not yet.
Okay.
And we are gonna bring back the edits that the commission wanted us to make to their next meeting. So that'll be another workshop. So we're not close to putting formal language yet.
Okay. I think we need action on this item, right?
I don't think, because we're not ready yet.
Yeah,
Not yet.
yeah,
Okay,
Just thoughts.
just any comments.
so I don't really have any other thoughts to bring other than just let us know how everything at the state goes.
Okay.
But unless there's any other conversations regarding this matter, is the next the letter of support? Okay. Oh, it's still,
Yeah.
good, go right ahead, Anya.
So the state is currently, they have a bill pending to create what's called a climate super fund, which essentially works the same way as the current federal Superfund bill works, that was created back in the 80s, where polluters pay to clean up their pollution. So this would look at fossil fuel companies and the pollution they've caused over the decades, look at the climate damages that have been that Maine has experienced, and require those polluters to pay compensatory fees proportional to that damage in Maine. And Bangor in particular, when you look at our climate vulnerability assessment that was done a few years ago, we're particularly vulnerable to flooding, especially in our downtown. Severe storms, we've experienced some major power outages and things. Drought, as we experienced last year, extreme heat, and all of those things really put a lot of strain on our infrastructure and cause increasing costs for things like emergency response and things like that. When we have really heavy rain events, which we've been experiencing more in recent years, like very heavy downpours, that can really strain our sewer and stormwater systems and cause overflows. So what this bill would do would be, once those compensatory fees are recouped from the companies, then communities like ours would get that money to help, bolster our infrastructure, which would in turn decrease the property tax burden, because the infrastructure is going to need to be repaired and bolstered anyway, and otherwise we foot the bill for that. So what we're requesting is just a letter of support. If you're amenable supporting this bill, and we would draft that, basically what I've said so far, we'd use that to draft the letter and send that to the state.
Questions or comments on the support letter?
I have a question.
Yes,
but I don't-
please.
It's probably not for you. It's probably more for the people who wrote the bill, but there's FEMA money. If it's still available. So would this, how would that work do you know like how that would work in a storm event and there's damage to infrastructure? Because yeah, I know like, the municipalities can apply for FEMA money. Would this kick in after that? Cause I know that doesn't usually make somebody whole.
Well, yeah, I mean, FEMA money really helps you repair after disaster, and this funding would be more to go a step further and increase our resilience, you know. And on top of that, we could use that to help make, residents more resilient to power outages, help them get generators or, get air conditioning or something with extreme heat. And then on top of that, the FEMA funding is in question. Some communities have been denied FEMA funding recently. And with the scale of disasters that are happening more frequently and the cost, there are questions about whether FEMA funding will even be able to cover all of the costs in the future, so.
Okay. How's the committee feeling? Yay or nay on this letter? Do we need a roll call vote or it seems like the committee's,
Gosh, you don't have anybody on Zoom, so.
okay, so I guess I'll just take a motion then.
I'm not in favor of it because I don't know enough about it yet.
Okay, that's totally fair. So we will need a roll call vote then if it's motioned and seconded.
I would move that we could support a letter of support.
Okay, I have a motion. Do I have a second? Okay, moved and seconded. It is doubted, so we'll do a roll call vote. Counselor Dean,
Yes.
Counselor Carson,
Yes.
Counselor Mallard,
No,
Counselor Falloon,
Yes.
and I'll be yes. So that will be 4-1 in favor. Okay.
Thank you.
So we have some follow-ups from a memo regarding city-owned properties that do you want me to describe more, or should I?
Yeah, I just,
Wait.
I prepared just some information, regarding, the use of the Economic Development Fund and sort of why, and just generally speaking, why a lot of communities have enterprise funds. So it's a way to kind of manage, in this case, all of your city properties so that they're, the general taxpayers don't bear that burden of, paying the person that's mowing the lawns at our, undeveloped properties or properties that we lease. So, things like that, and they're pretty common. A lot of communities have separated enterprise funds for specific things like this. So I wanted to just give you some background on that. We also prepared the list of properties and buildings that come under this fund. Every year as part of your budget process, you'll see a much more itemized list of, exactly, the expenditures that we budget for every year for these properties and, what we expect to spend. So you'll have, it'll just be part of your budget process that you'll accept or otherwise edit. I asked Sarah McQuillan to come this evening. She's our development analyst who works with our economic development team that manages the leases and the properties. So if you have specific questions, one of us should be able to answer.
one question. I'm just curious. What utilities that we're paying out of the leases that we receive include electricity?
That's correct, right? Well, it depends, right?
Yeah, sorry.
That's okay.
So yeah, it depends on the
So sorry, if
individual.
you could just
Yeah,
state your
introduce
name and your.
Sorry, Sarah McClellan, Development Assistant. It depends on the individual lease, how the utilities were set up at the time. At the moment, we only have one leased property with a tenant that we are covering the electric cost for. And the way that the lease was structured was that the rent due every month would cover the cost of all utilities.
So we were just getting enough to cover our expenses. How long have we had this lease? Has it been updated, yearly, every 3 years, or is it a
So
20-year lease?
A lot of the leases have been recently, as you've seen on your agendas, recently renegotiated. So I'm not sure if that particular one was recently done or not.
This one was last amended in 2023. And it's also written into this lease, that we have the ability to change the lease amount to cover utilities if utilities are starting to go over what we're getting.
So why would we lease property for just to cover utilities?
I mean, the previous policy of this fund, from what I understand in the files, is that, you know, this was a fund created to lease and manage properties, and not necessarily as a fund to, you know, to make money, because the money, it's an enterprise fund that stays within the fund itself to support itself. So
It doesn't make sense to me that you'd be leasing something for just the expenses of water, sewer, stormwater, and electric when maintenance is not included. So if you have a maintenance issue, that's not covered by the lease, right?
The lease amount covers all possible, well, to the best of anyone's knowledge, all possible expenses for the property. So I look
It
back.
covers everything, yeah. So I'm just confused when I see these two items separated here. It doesn't look like it's included in the lease, and that's why I wondered if maintenance was.
So when I look back at the last 5 years of what we've gotten in lease revenue versus what we've spent on each of these properties, we haven't lost money on any of them. And we've more than broken even on all of them over the last 5 years.
Breaking even is not a profitable operation. We need to make money.
No, we've done more than that. We have made money on them.
I just find that strange in the business world, that give people a free ride.
one thing that our economic development team has been doing in renegotiating leases is bringing them to a market rate. They're doing the analysis to make sure that, you know, we are doing more, as you say, than just covering our basic costs.
How many are at a market rate now? What percentage would you say?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure who's up, coming up, so.
If I could actually piggyback off of that point, Councilor Mallard. Well, one of the things I would like to see regarding these funds is almost like a defined performance metric or an annual report, just so that not only for staff to view, but also for council to sort of view, so that we know what directions we can take for the overall sum of these funds in the future. Because I don't. You are right to nitpick, Councilor Mallard. Well, 100% you are. I think it is important, though, to make sure that we know what we're working with on this committee, so that we can plan around what we want to use these funds for in the future. Plus, also, sometimes there are things that, like whether it's capital maintenance repairs or whatnot, that we're not able to foresee the future in terms of that. There might be some things that we do need to reconcile regarding what we charge for leasing these or renting these properties out in some way. So I think having a annual report or that sort of metric will probably help all of us see what these properties not only their values, but their importance to the city overall for the fund itself. Does that make sense?
I mean, we can make that part of the budget package for the ED fund, is to have a report that it comes with it.
I would like that if the committee's commendable to that.
Can I ask how much detail you would like in the report?
You know.
Oh, I know, and I'm putting the numbers together.
You know that's a fair question, and I think off the top of my head, I hesitate to give like specific guidance in regards to that. But at the end of the day, what I would like to see is a categorized list of all these different properties and what we get from them annually.
Yeah.
And if you if if the committee wants to get further into the weeds regarding we only charge sewage and rent for this, but not electricity or whatever the specifics you want to go further into that. I think that's more helpful, but when we're just looking at overall funding and line items for the budget process, that's really data I think is more privy to your department, less so for us to look at, but I mean, I could be wrong. Yes, Councilor Carson.
I mean, I would agree with you for the budget process. I don't need all of those pieces, but if the question is how do we want to move forward with the enterprise fund? How do we want to grow? How do we want to, we have vacant buildings, we have vacant lots. What do we want to do with those? We would need capital in the enterprise fund if we want to. So I would like more detail if that's the question. And then I have a follow-up, which maybe doesn't get answered right now, but vacant buildings, right? Is there like 178 Corporate Drive? I don't know what's over there.
That's a booster pump station.
And then we have a lot of vacant lots. I mean, do we have plans around any of that right now? It's a
Well,
vacant lot.
our
Is it
economic
possible?
development team works with people to, to try to sell the properties. We're trying to, or lease.
Okay, Councilor Fuller.
Is it typical for municipalities to that have ED funds like this to do this way where they're just like making a little bit more than what the expenses are? Or do they do it, where they're making a lot of money? And if so, what are they doing with that?
It's unusual overall for a municipality to own this much property at all. I mean, this was all part of when the airport, the airport became an airport, and a lot of the properties were given to the city from the military. So that's very unusual. Most municipalities don't own property like this. They'll own little pieces here and there that they have taken for taxes, but at this level, it's unusual. And I think, again, that was why the ED fund was created, was, okay, we need to focus, on maintaining, selling, leasing these properties in their own fund.
Yes, Councilor Carson.
I love that it's unique. I don't know if there's a preference or how we decide whether we're going to lease or we're going to sell, but I really have a preference for us not selling off properties that we own because that is unique, because of their potential for cash flow. And because everything in this country has been hyper privatized. I think it's great for municipalities to actually own some land. So I really would hate to see us selling and have a preference.
And that has been the policy for years, is that, that leasing, even if it's a long-term, you have a lot of 30-year leases out there. To have long-term leases for just that reason, to have that control over who's going in there as well. What kind of businesses you want to attract. So, I mean, it's an incredible tool that you have.
Okay, what is it, like 14,000 plus lots Bangor has, and how much does the city own? Like, must be close to 350, 400. So
Yeah, I don't know that number, but I'll get it, because that's a good one to know.
So it's at the end of the day, it's not a lot of properties for us to have a sheet or a performance metric to view. So I think this will help not just for business economic development, but just for all general committees, just because property affects every single aspect of the city. Were there any other thoughts or questions on this? And
I didn't need action. This was just a request to give you more information.
So I think Councilor Carson, do we want to have another discussion regarding the types of information that we want for the properties that the city owns? Or do we want to trust staff to give us a more detailed performance metric for those properties? What are your thoughts on that?
I trust staff to,
Yeah, I mean, we'll put
I mean, I think it
together.
depends on whatever question we're asking it. But
Yeah.
I trust your judgment in knowing that.
Okay,
We'll put, since we're so close to your budget time, we'll put an annual report in with your budget.
okay,
Budget sheet, so you have
I think that's acceptable.
one.
Thank
Thank you, sir.
you so much.
Thank you.
All right, and now we just have general updates, Grandview Development, Main Downtown,
Yeah, very quickly,
Yeah.
I know it's late, so I won't take up much of your time, but I just wanted to update you and inform, especially newer members that may not know about the Grandview project. It was a project that was started a few years ago, when, well, as you know, previous counselors have had housing as their top priority for a while. And so in 2023, we started looking at city-owned properties to look at, is there a way that we could, be part of the solution? And so the Grandview lot really kind of popped up as a really viable option. As you can see what's around it. It's so well located with the high school, Prentice Woods, shopping, jobs, Huston, very close by. So it's a well located property. So we did we actually first we had a neighborhood meeting that was facilitated but with design professionals, and we kind of got out the maps and the markers and came up with some ideas, and then we did an RFQ for a developer, chose Developers Collaborative out of Portland. They do a significant number of affordable projects. And the affordability that we're looking at is 80 to 120% median income. Because what we were finding is a lot of people, in that area, in that demographic, they make too much to get subsidies, and but market rate housing is still out of reach for them. But they're here, they're working, they just need to have decent housing. So that's the demographic that this project is looking at. So you had authorized us to enter into a development agreement, which has been done, and we're working with them right now to come up with a development scenario. This is a very unusual situation. You don't look at development scenarios because they're on private property and they go to the planning board. But because ultimately you, as the city, are the applicant for the planning board to review the project, we will be bringing you a more formal development plan. The one that's in your packet, that's already been changed, but I just wanted you to see sort of the kinds of things that we're looking at with that site. So ultimately, probably at your April meeting, you'll have a more formal presentation of a development plan that you will either accept or reject or otherwise edit, as well as a review of the pro forma. Because you have, as part of the development agreement, dedicated $2 million of ARPA funds to pay for pre-permitting and infrastructure costs for this parcel. So it's very important that you look at both as well.
all right. Any thoughts on Grandview Avenue lot at all? Yes, Councilor Miller.
I'm just curious, what are we going to get out of the lot? I mean, are we going to gain revenue from taxes, I assume?
Yeah, it'll be privately owned, so yes.
And the property costs them,
That's part of the development agreement, is that you're giving the property to the developer.
so we lost that. Okay, just checking.
Any other thoughts or comments? Yes, Councilor Dean.
This could be premature, but what do you anticipate for time frame for breaking ground?
This year is what they're looking at for, spring, summer construction.
Great.
Yeah.
Oh, yes, Councilor Flynn.
So do you know what the anticipated completion date would be? like roughly?
It's probably gonna be done in phases. They're looking to do the rentals first so that they can kind of get that income going, get that portion of the property developed, so then they can work on the, because there's also gonna be an element for ownership housing as well, so.
Of course.
The ownership, would that be like the single family?
Possibly single
Units,
family,
yeah.
possible condos, yeah. We're still working out some of the details.
Okay. Any continuing thoughts on the main downtown center?
Oh, yeah, yeah. Very good news that the city's downtown is gonna be part of the Maine Downtown program that Maine Development Foundation organizes, part of a national Main Street America program. It you know, it opens you up to some funding ability. There's, you know, funding programs that they run. You get, you know, you it's just part of that Bangor buzz that we do in economic development, of just getting the name Bangor out there nationally beyond just Maine. These are the types of programs that really help you get there.
Any questions on, oh, yes.
Oh, okay.
Nope, you're good.
Been nice.
I will concur, nice. Unless there's any other thoughts or comments from council or staff, it is currently 8:25. This is the last committee for this evening. Thank you so much for attending, everyone, and we are adjourned.